Hello and welcome everyone to Last Level Press. I'm Mr. Black, and I come to you now to set the record straight regarding Payday 2. I once covered this game, as some of you may recall, during a free weekend on Steam quite a while back. And as some of you may recall, with a sliver of resentment, I did not receive the game very well at the time. I did not really enjoy it. My first impressions were quite negative, and I left the game then wondering how in the hell this game was so damned popular. I've since received a great deal of requests from a number of you that I come back to the game and give it a second shot, and one of you was even so compelled to see me return to the game that you donated it to me to ensure that I could, when I let you know that due to my limited funds, I couldn't really afford to come back to it because it is a $30 retail game on its own. You know who you are for the donation, thank you very much for that, and rarely have I ever come around and revised my opinions, top to bottom, objective, subjective, you name it, regarding a game like I have for Payday 2. I rescind the vast bulk of my criticisms for this game, and I know why I was given such a bad impression of the game at first when I played it during that free weekend. I don't know whether or not there was a discrepancy between the version that those enjoying the game for a free weekend or whether or not it was just an older version of the game, but either way, the version I played did not feature almost any tutorial to speak of, and this game is rather complex, leading me to just dive straight on into the deep end and flail around the pool, wondering how in the hell I'm meant to do all of the great many things in this complex game, and thus I was very frustrated. I didn't know what to do, much less how to do the things, and it all just led to a great deal of frustration and resentment on my part, and yet you guys were so adamant that I would like this that you kept demanding I come back to it and were gracious enough to send it to me. Once again, thank you. Now, what is Payday 2? I want to break this game down in this episode in rather excruciating detail so that I can kick off a series of heists for this game, largely on a cooperative basis in the future, so fair warning up front, not a lot of action in this episode. More or less a mini review of sorts, breaking down the way that the game works so that we can all be on the same criminal page as we move forward with this series. Now, Payday 2 is kind of a multifaceted game. I once rather derisively called it, unfairly so I acknowledge, half the game, as most contemporary competitive FPS titles, and I recognize and rescind that statement now. I recognize that as an unfair sort of claim to make, and I made it insofar as the game, like I mentioned, does usually retail for $30, half the usual sum asked for by other contemporary FPS titles, and I used to think that due to the fact that this game does not feature any dedicated single-player campaign and does not feature any amount of dedicated PvP. The entire game is either a sort of solo version of multiplayer maps or largely a cooperative PvE experience. Now, every given mission is more or less a heist of some sort, or some kind of criminal mission, usually heists, and one has usually two ways to go about them. Going loud with non-suppressed weapons, heavy armor, and brute force tactics, and then there's going the quiet, stealthy route with light armor, with disguises, with electronic jamming, and of course suppressed weaponry, the like. And the game plays very differently in both ways. The loud approach usually tends to play out comparably to games the likes of Left 4 Dead, which is to say a co-op wave survival PvE sort of game in which one really just flies off the cup and off the cup, yes, right off of my cup, and makes split-second decisions to try to figure out how to get to an objective, how to achieve that objective, how to get extracted, etc., etc. And then there's the stealth approach, which usually tends to be a more protracted affair with a bit more research behind it, and the difference between the two approaches as far as player reward is concerned is that the loud approach tends to reap rather quick rewards. You can usually gain a pretty speedy sort of reward in terms of we're going to break in the doors, we're going to kill everyone in the way, we're going to retrieve the valuables we're after, and then we're going to go get paid. However, you're not necessarily going to receive the same amounts of actual pay or experience for a loud run, which are usually concluded much more quickly than a stealth run, as one would from a stealth run, which sort of offsets the sort of discrepancy that I once considered to be a bit of a flaw in that design. I've since come to realize that it's actually a rather elegant means of balancing the game such that those who want to run repeated, quick, loud missions will actually, within the same amount of time, usually receive a comparable amount of in-game reward to those who take the time to do stealth runs. I actually like the fact that the game doesn't necessarily make either way of playing more rewarding than the other. I, for one, tend to like a bit of a mixture. I like, especially when I go solo, to just rock faces, go loud, guns blazing. I rock the renamed Saiga. I forget exactly what they call it in-game, but it's essentially a Saiga 12 gauge. Love it. And our usual partner in crime, Ghost Protocol, is kind of our resident stealth master on the other hand. He's teaching me his ways, although I don't necessarily always make for the greatest of students. However, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me break down a little bit more of the way that this game works. Like I said, it is a co-op affair, and while any given mission can be conducted on a solo basis, usually it's a better idea to come at them either with the AI bots, which are not terribly badly programmed. It could be better, but they do an adequate job. And they essentially fill the usual 4-man team slots depending upon how many you have active. You can also disable them and go completely solo, which does work rather well for certain stealth missions, bank heists in particular. And then, of course, there is the usual run of cooperative heists with friends. And that, I think, is where this game absolutely thrives the most. Playing with a good communicative group of friends, guildies, clanmates, whatever you've got, whatever group you play with, do it on voice chat and you will not regret it. This game absolutely thrives upon the actions of everyone else. And the one thing to note before I jump into the skills and perks and all of that is that no two runs of any given mission are ever the same in this game. There are a number of random variables from door and room placement, camera placement, guard patrol routes, the number of NPCs on a given map, whether they be civilians or guards. All of that tends to get, to some degree, randomized, and Guard Adaptive AI leads them to behave a little bit differently depending upon your actions, the actions of others. Who has disappeared? Where'd Larry go? Every time. And again, that leads to a not quite to the same degree as procedurally generated unique experience, but at least an organically evolving experience every time one plays a mission in this game, and I very, very much like and applaud that. The developers are also rather consistent in adding new updates to the game, some free, some by way of DLC, and they do rather frequent crossovers with other IPs. Rather recently, the two that come to mind are Hotline Miami, in which there are, I believe, by way of a DLC, new missions and maps added to the game, as well as a number of the game's rather iconic masks, the very same as used by the central characters within the Hotline Miami game. And if you're not familiar with that, I think it's a rather 2D-ish, top-down, hyper-violent assassination game, kinda comparable to the insane levels of violence that this game gets into. The other crossover recently comes by way, let's see if I can actually jump on over to him to exemplify. There we are, set as preferred. John Wick, yes, the very same from the recent Keanu Reeves movie, who is apparently a part of the same universe as Payday 2. Apparently he's an old war/crime world buddy of Chains, one of the other iconic characters. Now, since I've gotten all of that out of the way, I do believe I've covered most of my bases. Let's jump into the inventory. One of the major draws to continually coming back to this game, equipment customization. It's got a bit of that Diablo-esque quality to it in that every time one completes a mission successfully, note successfully, you will gain any kind of random drop, one of them, whether that be a mask, a weapon component part to customize the weapons that one can buy, or I believe patterns for masks, patterns and colors, and from the completion of matches, one will receive XP, which of course goes toward the usual type of character leveling, and with that, skills and perks, which are rather self-explanatory, as well as 2 different types of currency. One, offshore, which is used for a number of sort of background effects, the likes of buying different advantages prior to going into a heist, and then there is the spendable cash, which one uses for the purchase of weapons, of masks, of new equipment, and of course for the modifications thereof. I don't really get, however, why certain things are just inanely expensive. For example, I don't believe, let's see, I've got those in stock from DLCs, so I can't exemplify the actual cost. Yes, an assault light for a SIG 552, for whatever reason, will cost me over $100,000 to assemble and attach to my weapon. I just don't really understand why that is. Can we not just move the decimal points over and make it a more reasonable number? I'm not quite sure. It's the one thing that never fails to knock me out of what little immersion there is to be had in this game. Now, as far as that is concerned, very, very minor gripe, but one that I did want to bring up, and one, of course, gains a lot of weapon slots, and there are plenty of things to be done. For instance, my poor, poor AK. Ain't she ugly? She's a beast, but I love her. Because I've got a custom barrel extension, custom grip, got a red dot on her, and then, oh god, yeah, I know, Gunblur is going to cry, because I've got what looks like an M4-ish sort of stock on her. She's horrid, but I've customized almost every aspect of my AK, and its stats are off the charts. Love it. It performs very well, as does my, essentially, Saiga, which looks a great deal better. However, I could still do with a somewhat better foregrip, and preferably a better stock. Now then, let me get off of going over all of the different primary weapons. However, there are, very quickly, a great deal of them to be had, unlocked as one goes by gaining character levels, and also by, of course, buying DLCs, which unlock additional parts for the arsenal as well. Recently there was, I believe it was like an antique weapons, adding a great deal of content from like World War II. So again, constant updates and DLCs are added to this game to give it new, fresh life rather frequently. So as you can see, a great deal of variety is present within every sort of... Ooh, akimbo. When did akimbo get added? When do I... Oh, requires the ambidexterity perk or the akimbo skill. How do I get this? I want it. Did that get added with the recent update that added John Wick into the game? I bet it did, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So, let's go back and have a look. Okay, now, for primary, you got long arms, secondary, pistols and shotguns, melee, knives, you can bean somebody in the face with a money bundle, with a psycho knife, a 50 blessings briefcase. I never realized the name of some of these, etc., etc. So, lots of different things to customize about one's character. You can also, I'm going to bounce back over to Dallas because he's got this sexy salt and pepper. One of these days, I'm going to rock that kind of distinguished beard. One of these days. And each of the characters within the game do feature a bit of background to them. The game itself is by no means a narrative-driven experience. However, there is actually a rather deceptively deep backstory and narrative that is rather ongoing with each successive update to the game that one can parse out by way of the scenarios presented by each given mission, and then of course by their completion, the way that they get progressed. For instance, the character Hoxton in the original Payday the Heist was, I believe, arrested, and I never played the original, mind you. Recently there were missions added into the game in which the entire team can go and then bust the old Hoxton out of prison and then raid an FBI office to discover who it was that set him up, etc., etc. And thus the game kind of ties itself together with its predecessor, and I like that about it. The narrative is there for those who wish to dig for it. However, it doesn't get in the way of the real reason we're here, the action. So, the rewards for which, now that I have covered the material goods, I'll get to the masks at a later date, are for skills and perks. skills are essentially the usual type of leveled abilities that one can place skill points. I've got none. Usually there will be a number down here in the bottom left indicating how many one has available, and each of these will of course indicate the number of points that it requires to invest into a skill, and one usually needs to have certain prerequisites to get into the higher levels. Oh, there's a Kimbo! It's at the top right of the fugitive tree. Nice! I now know where I'm going. Also note, skills don't just require skill points to gain the progressive levels of, but also money from one's spendable account. And that is where one needs to kind of balance, do I want to get better gear or better skills? And usually if one goes with very high risk, high reward sorts of heists, which is to say going at very high difficulty, you can usually stay ahead of the curve and keep up high quality gear as well as a good spec of skills. Now, as far as the different skill trees available, there are essentially one skill tree per main character, which is to say Mastermind, Enforcer, Technician, Ghost, and Fugitive. All rather self-explanatory, all of which definitely give one a very unique sort of skill set and value within a team. A player that has gone, like myself, rather heavily into Enforcer plays a very significantly different role within a team as, say, a Technician, which is usually more about utility, whereas Enforcers are more about not just the dealing of damage, but the controlling of crowds, the corralling of NPCs, etc., etc., whereas Mastermind tends to have abilities that sort of act a little bit like total party buffs, as well as acting as a sort of medic of sorts, as a great deal of their abilities have to do with medical bags. Ghost, of course, is great with stealth, and also with the disabling of various security features. Fugitive, like I said, is rather new, was added to the game with the same update that added John Wick. I like that, however, I'm still getting used to exactly what it does, and thus I have, as the game did recently also, completely restructure the functionality of its skill tree and refunded all players all of their skill points and money spent on them to go and completely respec. Thank you very much to the devs for that. They could easily have made that quite a headache and did not. In fact, the devs usually tend to be quite generous whenever they make changes to the game to make sure that everyone continues to have a good time with it. I have thus gone into a few of the Fugitive skills and found it to be really good for my sort of jack-of-all-trades type of playstyle, in that I want to be able to contend in combat, but not necessarily jump right into it when I could at least try to go for a stealthy approach. Now then, Infamy is one of the levels of the game that is sort of equal parts prestige and bragging rights, as well as material advantage, which is to say, once one gains, I believe, level 100 within the game, I'm at the 50s of rank, one can go infamous, a la the promotions of characters within, say, Mass Effect 3's multiplayer, completely reset all of one's skills, one's abilities, I believe one's access to certain bits of equipment, and thus gain an infamy level. I believe there are 5 ranks of infamy, each one unlocking progressively more rewards in terms of masks available, the increase of chance for the very high like specialty infamy items at the end of matches for drops, as well as giving one progressively increasing bonus percentages of decreased costs for the likes of skills, of certain equipment, as well as bonus XP, so that each gap between the different infamy levels is a little bit shorter. So a lot of incentivization is given to players to continue playing the game. It is deceptively deep, and I like that about it. I once considered this game to be rather simple, and I was dead wrong. This game is not the rinse, lather, repeat sort of co-op experience that a great many other party-based, objective-based gameplay sorts of games are, and I am very glad to have discovered otherwise. Now, the last thing that I want to cover is the safe house. I will not, for the purposes of time management, be jumping into any heists for the purposes of this video. Like I said, I warned you at the beginning. However, I do want to exemplify a few of the functions of the game before we move forward. Now, you'll notice within the HUD design, it is rather unobtrusive. However, it does give one a great deal of information. I do not use the Hox HUD mod, which is actually officially supported by the developer developers and adds a great deal more information to that which someone can see on their screen while playing. I may upgrade to that in the future. However, for now, this is what is actually within the vanilla version of the game. So, you can see the different sorts of equipment that I've got down there in the bottom right, as well as my stamina and my health. And the safe house acts as a sort of meta hub for the game. It's a map of sorts that one can venture into to go and practice many of the different mechanics of the game. And in lore, as it were, it kind of acts as the home of the different characters that work within the game. And unfortunately, as you'll no doubt come to discover in future episodes of this series, I'm recording this game with fraps, and it's not very kind to my frame rate, so I do apologize for the rather stuttery jittering about the map. Now, let's mask up, as it were, even though I don't have a mask to don right now. I've instead got John Wick shades. One can access a great many nice little utilities here in the safe house, and it's a great place to practice, whether that be how to use certain bits of equipment. Lord knows I've used that extensively here for trying to figure out how I'm even supposed to use things like drills, like ECMs, or even come and access the crime.net, essentially lobby for discovering missions, which I'll come back to in a minute as it will take me away from the safe house if I delve into right now. But let's have a quick look at some of the training rooms, and also the visual representation of my offshore spending account. $33 million! Oh, what I wouldn't give to actually have access to all of that green. Wouldn't that be nice? I wouldn't quit, though. I would not quit. I would continue to do what I do, because I love what I do, and I love you. Oh, yes. Love it, love it, love it. Now, in here is not necessarily a firing hole, although one can use it for such purpose. Let's see, can I grab... There we go. Keycard. And practice. Wait, there's no wall there. Opening certain doors. Can I not use the keycard? No, that's gonna... Oh, there we go. Oh. Thank you, Bane. You can tell I'm still rather noobish when it comes to getting things done in this game. Now, let's pick a lock and demonstrate exactly how one goes about this game. I like the fact that nothing is overly complex. The systems that work within the game are appropriately complex in terms of figuring out where to go, where to be, what to do when. However, the actual doing of things like picking locks, like setting explosives, like drilling doors, aren't overly burdened with the complications of things like annoying little mini games or anything of the like. It's more or less go to thing, press F, hold F, let thing do what thing does, proceed. And I like that about it. For instance, let's set our drill and check exactly how long that would usually take. 177 seconds. Which means that were I on a mission map right now, I would need to either go and hide and prevent any NPC on the map from discovering my drill, usually assuming that that's going to gain access to a vault of some kind or some kind of secure room, or I could, were I going loud, as I like to do, essentially form a stand, lay down medical bags, lay down ammo bags, and start defending that door with my life. And I like the fact that, like I said earlier, the game allows one to go about it any number of ways. And I mentioned before, this laptop here on the desk does allow access to crime.net, essentially the game's lobby and matchmaking system, which apparently also dumps me now onto the main menu. I could have sworn that actually let me come onto this menu directly before. Good lord, there are a lot of games in progress right now, and if this looks a little busy and a little intimidating to you, it does to me as well. And this is the one bit of substantial criticism I will retain from my initial first 15 of this game. I don't like the crime.net format of this menu. It's just very busy, very arcane. I like the idea of it, that of representing the missions and heists in progress that one can select and go and participate in within the game on a map of the city in which the game takes place. I like the idea of that. However, in practice, it means you spend more time looking around for matches before they disappear than actually just going to, I want to do X mission at X difficulty with X sort of gamble of reward, and I'm just not very fond of it. It's not terribly intuitive, nor is it very easy on the eyes. You may notice that missions keep popping up and disappearing every couple of seconds, and like I said, that can make it a little bit on the frustrating side to really get the sort of mission that you're in the mood to go on at a moment's notice. So I'm not exactly sure, really, how one could reconcile keeping up the thematic sort of representation of games in progress while giving it a more organized sort of presentation. However, I'm just giving a little bit of criticism into the bleak darkness, as it were, that's not terribly fond of at least this manifestation of that system. Now, you can tell a great deal about a mission by hovering over it. You can tell who is hosting, how long it is. Certain missions do take essentially multiple instances, which act as multiple days that one must complete in sequence to receive any reward. You'll actually get to see what the reward is. For this one, being Death Wish, the highest difficulty, one gains a 10% experience bonus, as well as a payout of, now that it's disappeared, I don't recall, something along the lines of $400,000, as well as any extra rewards that one can go and snatch throughout a given match. I like that. It's very informative, just difficult to go and find things in. So really the only thing that I don't like about Payday 2 is its lobby system. And if that's the only thing I can criticize with any real strength, I think the game is doing just fine. So there you've got it, folks. I've actually recorded this little bit as I recalled that I was going to come back to that laptop a little bit earlier. I already kind of recorded my intro. So, by the power of editing, let's resume that outro now. Now down this way is a representation of the many masks one has accrued and created. I really am fond of my wolf mask. That was one of the unique masks available during the recent Halloween event. And all of the weapons one has accrued on the racks on the wall. Love my 308. Love her so much. Do I really have that many pistols? Apparently I do. Oh yes, you. My 1911. I need to get a Kimbo so that I can dual wield you. Okay, now, lastly, we do have our firing hall, complete with ammo bags. I forgot that was there. And the combat in this game is very snappy. It may not necessarily look like it due to my rather punished frame rate right now. However, the game does feature very responsive controls, and it's kind of a shame that there is no PvP, because I could really see a swift, snappy, responsive system like this game's FPS controls doing very well as a competitive game. As it is now, however, it definitely means that the confrontation with NPCs is never really a painful experience insofar as mechanics are concerned. It definitely gets incredibly painfully punishing when some of the higher power enemies come out to play, the likes of the heavily armored SWAT and FBI officers, and the one you'll get to see one of these days that I have affectionately dubbed Sam, after a certain green, goggly-eyed NVG-wearing asshole that likes to kick me in the face. Yeah, if you've played Splinter Cell, you know what I'm on about, and if you don't know what I mean about him in this game, you will. So, as you can tell, I'm kind of rocking a little bit of the Solid Snake right now in my arrangement of armament, as I'm rocking a suppressed USP. And I like my USP. She makes for a nice compact little weapon for the purposes of stealth, while still remaining quite punishing when it comes time to deal out a bit of lethal damage. And that is the one thing that I've also not quite covered yet. Equipment and loadout go a long way in determining how well one can actually accomplish what one sets out to do with respect to going loud or going stealth. You may have noticed on the front menu that I'm wearing what amounts to a suit with a bulletproof vest underneath the coat. And this makes for a good sort of medium between stealth and the ability to conduct combat for certain missions in which it's rather likely you'll be discovered, but you want to go stealth as long as possible. And in other cases, you'll want to use weapons that have a greater degree of concealment. Right now, these are, I believe, my best concealment weapons. The USP is quite small, thus it's got a high concealment rating, and the SIG 552 is, I believe, the most easily concealed primary long arm that I have in my arsenal, making it my primary for stealth runs as well. Larger weapons, the likes of my AK, or what I like to call the Taurus, as I recognize that the Taurus Judge, which they can't call that in the game for copyright reasons, is in the game as a sidearm under a different name, and I've affectionately dubbed it the Taurus because it's what I'm used to thinking of it as. So one definitely needs to come at, even for loud missions in which strategy is not necessarily quite as key as stealth, a great deal of thought needs to go into the planning, at least insofar as what one is bringing to the fight for any given mission, and I like that about it. The depth of the gameplay at work here is really outstanding, and I did not give it its proper due credit the first time around. That's really the purpose of this episode, to clear the air of all of the gun smoke and shreds of shrapnel and bits of flaming paper from coinage, and yes, paper from coinage. You can tell I'm rather tired. It's also why I've taken things a little bit more calmly, a bit more low-key. I'm rather tired and a little bit under the weather today, so I do hope you don't mind. And on that note, I'm going to leave this particular episode here and come back to Payday 2 in the very near future with likely Ghost Protocol, my usual partner in crime, and perhaps a number of others. I believe one of our other channel regulars, Menthius, as well as Noah of Nomad Studios and Mr. Whiskers of A Gamer's Dance Studio, also play this game a great deal. I've played with them on a number of occasions, and when it comes to missions requiring a full squad, we may definitely do a bit of 4-man co-op for Payday 2 in the near future. So I can't promise exactly with what regularity the Payday 2 series will proceed from here. However, when we've all got time and we're all in the mood for a bit of criminal expression of rage and frustration and need to get out the kinks of the day, or if we decide to just get our snake on and see how far we can take our stealth abilities, we'll come back to this game, and you lot can enjoy it. So, thank you for joining me for... I almost just stumbled over my words again. I am wont to do this on a number of occasions, especially when I'm tired, so do please, thanks. Oh my god, I keep doing... And I'm now, like, I'm boxing with my mic. I'm just... It's the violence. It's fully automatic weapons. They just bring out violence in me. I mean, it's the ski mask over there, and also it. Yeah, that is a straight-up it mask. Oh, good lord. The masks do make a great deal of references in this game, whether it's to Marvel, movies, Venom, all kinds of different things. So anyway, thank you all for joining me for this episode of Payday 2 here at Last Level Press. Look forward to more exciting, action-oriented combat to come in the very near future from this game. I'm Mr. Black, here at Last Level Press, and as always, I wish you all good gaming and Godspeed. Kill me, please. I would appreciate you not to be with the killing. Maybe, possibly. Alright, hide behind the tank. I trust the tank to block bullets a great deal more than I trust my sweater.